And now it's time for our next speaker, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us physically, but thankfully she's still with us all the way from Canada with a video message. So she's globally recognized for her leadership and initiatives to advance in human rights, health, and development. And former positions include the president of the Global Fund for Women, and she was also a member of the UN Women Advisory Board. So this exhaustive list of experience makes her a perfect addition to the UWC movement to continue the fight for female empowerment. So let's look at what Dr. Musimbi Kanyoro, the current chairman of the UWC International Board, wants to share with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate with you at this conference. I have a very special connection to the Netherlands because I was an intern in this country many years ago when I was still a student. And when we arrived, during the induction, the first thing that we were told was that God made the world and the Dutch made Netherlands. So I spent 6 months in that internship trying to find out how the Dutch made Netherlands. And indeed, I believe there's something to that statement. Today, my topic is how transformational education empowers girls. And so I had to actually address 2 issues. One is that, what do we mean when we say transformational education? And the second is, how does it empower girls? And so where do I get my data for having a conversation on this subject? First of all, I think I get some of the data just from my own life history. I believe that education has made a lot to my life. And without education, I wouldn't be in this forum together with you. The second part of the data is that for the last 4 decades, I have been working in the area of women and human rights. And I have traveled globally and seen the lives of girls in their own setting. I lived here in Europe for 20 years, based in Geneva, and I have lived for another 20 years in the United States. So seeing how it means to have an education, both living in the North, meaning economic North, and also in the economic South, because I was born in Kenya and was raised in Kenya, and my roots are in that country. My roots are not only in Kenya, but my roots are really for any people that come from countries that are economically challenged. And so I speak also with voices of women and girls from the economic South. So what have I learned about transformational education? For me, transformational education, or any education at all, is worth it when it is a tool that helps us to understand ourselves first, and to understand ourselves second in relationship to others in the world, and in relationship to the environment in which we live. So education gives us the confidence to be able to speak about who we are in the world. And I believe we offer that type of education in the UWC schools, because we offer an education that helps students both to experience what it means to live with others on campus, and also to take on projects and provide innovation for how those projects are run. I have seen it within the last 2 years, where I have seen students present different projects in different environments, and I have also participated on panels that are able to choose the best of those projects. And believe me, sometimes it's very difficult to choose because you can see innovation. And I have seen the girls' participation in those projects, because most of the time I have seen that the presenters in many of these projects are girls. And so what did I actually experience as I saw them? I saw self-confidence. I saw innovation in their thinking. I saw commitment. I saw their ability to learn to work in teams, teams that are mixed teams. And that early exposure to working in mixed teams not only gives the girls the ability to be able to express what they are thinking by themselves, but to express it in the context of also boys. Because those of us who went to school much earlier, we were often told that there were certain subjects that we could not study. Because why? Simply because we were girls. So we were given less exposure to mathematical subjects and to scientific subjects. But today, when I look at the students, I see that the students mix well. and they do not have that barriers of these subjects belong to boys or these subjects belong to girls. And the content of education embraces more of the things that are important to life, such as the environment. I have really been very impressed to see how many of our schools have embraced the idea of dealing with the issues of climate change. I think this is transformational education. And in the just recently concluded conference, intergenerational conference, which was hosted by the UN Women and hosted also by the countries of Mexico and France, it was very interesting to see the girls claim their voice. And many of the girls that I saw there claiming their voice, putting right there what they see as their human rights, what they see as the differences in their countries of origin, what they see as gender-based biases that exist for girls, are articulated in a way in which I could see the kind of girls that I have seen on the campuses of UWC schools. And so I'm really proud to see that the education we are offering and the education many girls are receiving in other contexts like ours are forming the kind of girls that will be women leaders, that are becoming women leaders, even at the early stage at which they are. There are girls, for example, and we can use this as a good example of why education is a valuable gift. Malala, who sets up a foundation of herself, for herself, that reaches out to enable more girls to get the kind of education that she was being penalized for by the system from which she came, because she's a girl. And I can tell you that even from the context in which I come, being a girl was not necessarily an option that you are going to have an education. And so when I look back, I feel that parents such as we had really had a foresight of giving the 7 girls of us that we are the biggest inheritance that we could get from them, which is education. And they indeed told us that by giving us education, they had actually crossed over the gap that exists in our culture, where girls do not inherit property. And they had given us an education so that we could be able by ourselves to decide what kind of property that we wanted, and to decide what kind of relationships we wanted, and to decide when we could get married, when to have a child or children if we want to, and with whom. These kind of decisions that are self-determining decisions are a result of a transformational education that is offered to girls in many places, and which our schools also offer to girls. I also want to say that transformational education creates people who are able to use what they have learned and be able to translate that into addressing the differences that exist in the societies. For example, the idea of diversity and inclusion is much more better understood when you have had an exposure to living with people with different circumstances, people with disabilities, people who are coming from less economically endowed families, people who are coming from places where there is overexposure to certain literature that also determines what we think politically. For example, at the present time in the world, a lot of what we see is political fundamentalism, and we cannot call this an emblem of the South or something that is done in the South. It's something that you see in the North-South, in the East-West, etc. We see this in our countries where we see lack of progress in the areas which have made a difference for women and things being reversed. And I think that transformational education for girls from the beginning will help them to see through this, and they will be part of the change makers that we expect them to be in as they lead, not only in the future, but as they lead in a progressive way, appropriately, as they also go through the age differences that they have to face. At this particular time, it's impossible to do a talk about transformational education without talking about the skills that are needed for managing technology, because we are in a world where technological communication and information is very important, and we have seen it during this time of COVID, how both technology has helped us to progress what we need to do and even opened up possibilities for more participation of people in terms of the quantity of people we can meet in this conference, as many as we are, because of technology. But it has also shown clearly that the divide that exists between those who have technology and those who don't have technology. So that if you look at education systems, for example, you will see those students that sustained their education during the COVID and those that have lost out completely for 2 years, maybe even 3 years, they will lose because they were not able to access technology. And so what does it mean when you have had transformational education? It means thinking through this and finding out, not just celebrating what you can achieve by yourself, but really thinking through what's going to happen to those people that have lost out because of lack of technology. But also technology has helped us to see that the lives of women have not been very pleasant during this time of COVID. We have recorded a lot of gender-based violence, and I'm sure that the girls who live in these families where these gender-based violences are experiencing the same. The data from all throughout the world shows that there have been a lot of marrying girls away during this time of COVID. We've also had a lot of data that shows that there have been a lot of early girl pregnancies that are not by the will of the girls, but are by the fact that they are so accessible and available, not being in school at this particular time. So there's a concern on what education is going to do to enable us to address these issues, but there's also a concern of what the girls themselves who are in privileged places such as in a school like this will do to be advocates of others, because freedom and liberation and peace does not come by one group, one set of people getting that liberation, but it comes to be realized when we are all part of it. So what I have seen as part of a celebration that we can do, I have seen that many of the girls that I have met in UWC schools do not take their lives singly, but they are able to pick on those subjects that help them to advocate for policies and for change for other girls in other parts of the world. I have seen that transformational education can help us to work to get our voice by training in better communication, in articulation, in charisma, and in the courage to be really representatives, not only of themselves, but representatives of others. And I will continue to be a strong voice at the board level in the UWCA for education that is transformative education that encourages boys and girls to learn together, to respect each other right from the beginning, to address and to be aware that gender-based violence is not here to stay, and to also be aware that zero tolerance for things that put women down, put girls down, is what we are all about when we want to be about transformational education. That learning maths and science and music all help to enhance those skills. But the really transformation begins when we get transformed inside ourselves and can be advocates for our own self and advocates for others in the world. Thank you and best wishes as you continue this conference.